Welcome to session 5 of RDBMS and Data Management. SQL Server is based on a special SQL dialect called as Transact SQL, which is an expanded version of ANSI SQL 92 standard. This session describes the concept of Transact SQL statements and provides details about how to create and execute Transact SQL statements in order to manage an SQL Server database and its data. SQL Server supports three types of Transact SQL statements: data definition language, data control language, and data manipulation language. This session discusses the elements of Transact SQL such as variables, functions, and so on, and provides examples that illustrate how they are applied in Transact SQL statements. SQL Server provides several approaches for executing Transact SQL statements. They can be executed as single statements or as a batch. So, the session objectives are: outline the key features of Transact SQL, discuss variables, data types, and comments in Transact SQL, summarize functions and expressions in Transact SQL, describe data definition language and identify the commonly used DDL commands, describe data manipulation language and identify the commonly used DML commands, explain data control language and identify the commonly used DCL commands, describe how to execute Transact SQL commands as single statement, batches, scripts, and list and explain the enhancement in Transact SQL. We come to Transact SQL language. Structured Query Language, or SQL, is a universal language used in the database world. Most modern RDBMS, including SQL Server 2005, use some type of SQL dialect as their primary query language. SQL can be used to create or destroy objects such as tables on the database server and to do things with those objects such as put data into them or query for data. Transact SQL is Microsoft's implementation of standard structured query language, usually referred to as SQL. This language implements a standardized way to communicate to the database. The Transact SQL language is an enhancement to structured query language, the ANSI standard relational database language. It provides a comprehensive language that supports defining tables, inserting, deleting, updating, and accessing the data in the table. Transact SQL is a powerful language which offers features like data types, temporary objects, system and extended stored procedures, scrollable cursors, conditional processing, transaction control, exception and error handling are also some of the key features which are supported by Transact SQL. Moving ahead, we see one simple example for Transact SQL. Select statement, which is used to retrieve all records from the employee table. We say select star from employee. Transact SQL includes many syntax elements that are used by or that influence most statements. These elements include variables, functions, data types, expressions, and comments. Coming to variables in Transact SQL. A variable is an object that can hold a data value. Data can be passed to SQL statements using local variables. In Transact SQL, variables can be created for temporary use while executing a batch of SQL statements. The name of the local variable must be prefixed with sign. Variables can be classified into local variables and global variables. Moving ahead, we come to local variables. In Transact SQL, local variables are created and used for temporary storage while SQL statements are executed. The syntax is @local variable as any data type, where the @local variable specifies the name of a variable. Variable name must begin with an symbol. Data type is a system or user defined data type. The set statement or the select statement is used to assign value to the local variable. For example, set @local variable is equal to a value, or select @local variable is equal to a value. Moving ahead, we see one example which demonstrates the use of local variables to retrieve value from employees table. We say declare @empid is a variable name and the variable is of type int. We say set @empid equals to 1, and we say select first name comma last name from employee, where employee ID equals to @empid. Then moving ahead, we come to global variables. Global variables are inbuilt variables that are defined and maintained by the system. Global variables in SQL Server are all prefixed with two signs. Like we have @version as SQL Server version details. Value of any of these variables can be retrieved with a simple select query, as we have seen in the given example. So in this case, @version is a global variable which is used to retrieve the version information for SQL Server.